Rolling in my 6.3.
Not without an engine, you're not.
Oh, come on, Mrs. Wizard.
Well, you better start pushing.
I guess. Let's talk about what's going on here. Let's get started. Isn't the front end beautiful on this thing, Mrs. Wizard?
She's got lots of chrome and curves on that girl.
Definitely is. I like how wide it is, and also how the rooftop is also about as wide as the body. Really cool car. You guys have seen this on previous videos, my 1963 Cadillac Coupe De Ville. And as you just saw, it is engineless at the moment. I've been driving this thing here or there and trying to get the enjoyment out of it and start cruising in this thing. And the more I drive it, just like I've told you guys before, it just leaks more and bigger puddles. It got to the point where I'd park it and there would be puddles like this big of transmission fluid. And we'll show you what we found today, what it was. But so when you see that auction online, a 2,000 mile this or that, whatever you're looking at, you need to get away from the idea that it's like a brand new car. It won't need anything. When the vice versa is true, it will need everything. As soon as you start putting the miles on it, seals are hard. They've turned from rubber into solid hard plastic. They will start letting loose. It's guaranteed. Junior Man has actually gone through and pulled the motor and transmission out for me, and we've only found more things that were wrong. There were several instances of things that were happening to this car that I was like, maybe we can fix this while it's in the car. Really don't want to pull the engine, blah, blah, blah. I was kind of procrastinating a little bit. But when I would start it, it would rattle like the lifters, and it would build up pressure. And I noticed it had an oil leak, and I found 2 or 3 oil leaks on the engine. And I found out on the transmission where my giant puddle is coming from. Before we dive into those, let's take a look in this really cool engine bay. This is the way they used to be back in the 60s. So here we are in the engine bay of the 63 Cadillac, and the word of the day is metal. There's really no plastic, at least not very much under this hood. Even these wheel liners or wheel wells are steel, all the way down to the frame almost. And as you look around, you see steel and more steel. Maybe a few hoses, a plastic reservoir for the windshield washer, but other than that, more steel, cast iron, more metal. And here's the crazy things I want to talk to you guys about. This car weighs about 4,600 pounds, fully loaded, ready to go. So you go to the modern cars where they start using plastic for weight savings. So you go to the Panther platform, the Buick LeSabres, the Buick Century, all these different cars. I mean, they changed things around, made them front-wheel drive, lighter, better on gas, and they still weigh 4,000 or 4,500 pounds. Especially like a 2002 Cadillac De Ville. There's tons of plastic all over that car. It still weighs 4,500 pounds. So why are we still using plastic? Why don't we go back to metal? It doesn't get brittle, it doesn't break, it doesn't snap. If it does, you can weld it. It's really easy to work with. There's literally no weight savings. A modern car this size, built today, will weigh the same as this car because there's so many more gadgets and gizmos and modules and computers and literally 10 times more wiring. That all adds up to weight. But Junior Man got this engine pulled out. He didn't have any issues, anything that caused him any trouble or problems. It came out really well, actually. He started in the morning, it was about lunchtime, and he had the engine crane over here. I was like, wow, that was quick. So there's not a lot of things to unhook. It went really well for him. The only trouble we had, we needed to get this thing on backwards so the engine crane can get to here and pull the engine out. So we backed the car onto the lift, and this thing is so long, it almost hit our shelving. Let's take a look. Not much room there, Mrs. Wizard.
No, hopefully you don't need any of that transmission fluid.
Well, we could still reach it and get to everything, but it almost touched the shelves. It's such a long car. But what's really crazy is when you get into the mid-70s, Cadillacs are even longer and even wider than this De Ville. They get even bigger. This is not as big as they get. So let's start talking about the things that we found wrong. So this is our hydromatic transmission. No, I didn't say turbo hydromatic. This is way back from 1949 technology. Hydromatic, 4-speed, old school. This really doesn't have much in common with your TH400, TH350. It is a completely different animal. This is the last year Cadillac used these, then they went to a TH400. This is a very antique style transmission. And look, Mrs. Wizard.
It's the shift shaft seal.
Yes, we put a new shift shaft seal in and we resealed it here, and it started to do pretty good until it started leaking fluid. There's a little plate that goes right here, and it was just pouring fluid onto the ground, and I was like, what? I thought possibly the seal right here, the input seal in the transmission, had gone bad. But we're going to go move over to the table and show you guys this is old technology. So here's our Taurus. No, it's not a torque converter. It does not multiply or amplify torque. It's just a Taurus, a viscous coupling. That's all it does. This is actually our flywheel. Just a flex plate. Very, very small stamped steel piece of metal. I'm going to show you where this thing was leaking. Modern torque converters, which are kind of like this, but not. They're welded together at the factory. You don't pull them apart without having to cut them open. But these old school Taurus or fluid couplings are actually sealed, and you can unbolt them and they come apart, and there's tons of little pieces and parts inside. This is actually where my leak was coming from, where my growing red fluid puddle was just getting bigger. Every time I drove it, it was bigger and bigger. I was like, all right, we got to get this fixed. So here we are. I'm going to take this cover off. But before we do, you can see it actually has a drain plug. We kind of drained it using that. You can drain all the transmission fluid out. Once you take all the nuts loose.
What, there's lots of nuts on this caddy?
Yes, it has multiple on here. What are there? 2, 4, 6, 8, like 10 or 12 of them. Everything looks decent in here. There's a little bit of wear going on right there. But you can see this lip right here. There's like a stepped groove there. And that's where this seal or O-ring goes into. Right there. That was our culprit. This seal had gone bad, and this thing was literally spitting fluid out into the bell housing, and when you would park it, all that would drip down onto the ground. That's a weird one. Have you ever heard of anyone saying basically their torque converter is leaking? Not the input shaft seal, the actual torque converter is leaking, and mine was. I'll go ahead and continue to pull this thing apart for you guys. Here's a little, kind of like a planetary set here. You can see the teeth inside of there. There's another little washer there. We'll keep that in place, set it aside. And then this is the Taurus. We'll go ahead and pull it apart. It's actually what the inside of a torque converter would look like. There's veins in between where fluid kind of flows through. And it lets it spin with the rear wheels not spinning. This will just spin. But as you can see, this is different than a torque converter. It doesn't amplify or multiply torque. It would just be a fluid coupling. So we're going to put new seals on. There was nothing wrong with it. Everything was working fine. We're just going to put a new seal on it, make sure all the other seals are replaced, and just basically put it back together. There was no metal shavings or anything in the pans, and it shifted beautifully, so I don't need to really mess with that. But while it was apart, I wanted to show you guys, the seal that had went bad and what it looks like inside one of these. So I'll go ahead and set this back together here so we don't lose any pieces or parts or anything. But definitely wanted to show you guys how complicated it is. You can see when you have it in park or you're at a stoplight, you have the brakes on, your engine's turning, but your rear wheels aren't. How is that possible? So basically when you're at a stoplight, this thing is spinning like this and your rear wheels aren't. That's how one of these work. A torque converter does the same thing. When we let off the brake and start to go, then it's able to overcome and the friction actually kind of catches with the vanes and starts turning the rear wheels. Kind of neat the way they work. This is way complicated, way more complicated than an average torque converter. There's a lot more going on inside of this thing. One thing that was really neat about these old Hydramatics, this is actually called a Jetaway, is the model name for this Cadillac, is it had a way to do kind of like a direct drive, like modern torque converters have clutches it can engage to get more of a direct drive. These had kind of a spinning gear type of a setup that would do the same thing, and it was really kind of cool the way it worked. But as you can see, it's very, very complicated. So there's a reason why I was having puddles all over the floor. Let's get this out of the way and talk about the other problems it had. So the red fluid I was seeing is kind of a new problem, but it's been leaking engine oil for quite a while. You can kind of see here, it's just caked on for, I don't know how long. It's been quite a long time. It's caked on pretty heavy. I want to show you guys, like I mentioned, you see that really cool old car with very low miles, but it doesn't change the fact about all the rubbery seals in the transmission, the differential, the engine. Like this here was a seal that was right here, or a gasket I should say. It was rubber, but watch this. Hear that, guys? It's just rotten. It's old. It may be even original from when it was new. That's not rubber anymore. It's actually plasticized. It's solid plastic now. And you try to get those old rubber plasticized seals and gaskets to start running and driving again, and they just start puking everywhere. Here's another one. This one's actually a little softer, but it's very stiff. It's on its way to becoming plastic. There's another thing. Junior Man actually pulled this oil pan off. We were looking at some things, and he had a question. I know from experience what this is. I'm going to turn it so you guys can see it. He said, what is all that gray stuff in the bottom? It's gray like aluminum. He thought it was bearing material or something like that. I'll go ahead and show you guys. But you see underneath there, it's gray. It's like bright gray. And I asked him, I said, you didn't touch it with your hands, did you? He said, no, I just seen it in there. I said, it's literally solid lead. He said, what do you mean lead? Is it from the bearings? I said, no. It's from leaded gas. Back when we didn't have unleaded gas, it was leaded gas. And as it burns and gets through the PCV vapors over decades and decades, it actually can build up a layer inside the engine of lead sludge. You don't want to get that on you or soak that into your skin. I told him, make sure to have gloves on when we get this cleaned out. That's actually 1960s and 70s and 80s lead from leaded gas. Kind of cool, isn't it? So let's get this thing out of the way and show you some more interesting finds.
It looks like it's got a UFO hovering over that engine.
It kind of does. Thinking of UFOs, click the link below to take you to Can You Believe That? It's a new channel with my friend Thomas Durant, who's a producer that's done Car Trek and Car Issues. He was the guy behind the cameras and kind of operating everything. He's a paranormal investigator, and me and him have our own channel talking about all the things tinfoil hat. So definitely go check that out. But luckily this isn't a UFO. It's not going to take us to Mars or anything crazy. It's just an oil pickup screen. One thing I noticed, there was more and more oil, engine oil, being shown on the floor, which has been leaking for a while, like I showed you, but it was getting worse. I found out the oil pump, which is external on this, is kind of cool right here. It actually drives off of a little shaft, and the oil pump is actually behind this plate, but it was spraying oil out of the case here. It's either a seal has gone bad, or maybe the inside, the clearances have gone bad and eat through. I'm not sure yet. I haven't torn it apart, but that might be while I was having the clattering, his oil pressure was kind of low. So likely the oil pump's going to need some addressing. It was definitely leaking. But on top of the red fluid I was seeing leaking through the Taurus over there, I was also seeing some engine oil dripping pretty heavily by the flex plate. I thought, oh man, it's a rear main seal. Like I said, I was procrastinating. I don't want to pull the engine and go through all this stuff, even though we finally have because it got so bad. I said, those are rope seals. Those are the old asbestos rope seals. I can never get them things to seal right. I was for sure. I was like, this is going to suck. I said, go ahead and pull it out, Junior Man. we got to fix the transmission leak, and we'll go ahead and fix these leaks. But I was pleasantly surprised. This is a 1963, and even from the factory, it did not have a rope seal. It's that standard two-piece rubber seal. Let's take a look. So here's our rear main cap, and you actually have to remove this to get to the seal. You can see the sealing surface right here, and here's the actual seal. You can see it's hard like leather now. It doesn't even flex anymore. And luckily this isn't rope, and you can see the way it's been cut when it was originally manufactured. It's not even meant to take rope. Look at there, guys, more lead. Yummy. So that will be able to be fixed with just a new rubber seal, and that'll take care of that. Let me see if I can get this one out of the crank here. Let me show you how actually you would remove that. So if this was in the car and you had it all apart, you would push right here, and you can see it would come out the other side. It's kind of slippery, so pliers will work. You're not too worried about damaging it. It's already bad anyway. Just pinch it and pull, and there we go. Listen to that, guys. It's not even rubber anymore. It's just hard plastic. And while this is out, we might as well go ahead and address all the other things like the front main seal, the timing cover. Just go ahead and reseal all this stuff before it goes back in. But finally, it had gotten to a point where I was like, we got to pull this engine out. Some of these things could have been done in the car. You probably could have done this rear main seal, but you could not have done the Taurus seal in the car. So all of it came out. There's one last thing I want to show you, something my mentor showed me with the drive shafts. Cadillac was notorious for using these, or especially the older GM cars. It's called the double cardan joint. Out here we see just a normal single U-joint. But when they had strange angles or more difficult angles, there's two U-joints. And in between these two U-joints is kind of a cardan joint down inside of here. I'm touching it. It's like a ball joint.
So it's like your knee.
Kind of like a knee, kind of like is, and there's two of them. It's double cardan joints. Here, look. There's two of them. But anyways, my mentor told me, he said, anytime you're working on any of these old cars with double cardan joints, never let it leave your shop without greasing the cardan joints. He said nobody ever has done those, even when they were new. They would just skip over it. They might grease the U-joints good enough and send it out the door. He said those things had a high failure rate because no one ever serviced them. And they are meant to be serviced. So luckily this wasn't too big of a deal for Junior Man. There wasn't tons of electronics, that's why. There wasn't 47 hoses and emissions and cats and all this garbage. It just came out real smooth and real easy. There really wasn't a whole lot. There's a couple of radiator hoses, some heater hoses. You didn't even have to unhook the spark plug wires. It just comes out with the engine. Maybe 5 or 10 wires. That's it. Just for sensors or senders for gauges and things, or some of the wiring for the starter. There really wasn't that much. That's why it came out so fast. We got quite a lot of seals and things to replace in this. We'll probably do the motor mounts as well. But once it's all resealed, it'll go in pretty smoothly as well. It won't take a whole week to put back in. It'll just take a couple of days. But definitely wanted to show you guys, I finally got tired of the leaks. It was a low mile Cadillac. It's still 80,000 miles. But once I started putting the miles on, she let me know, please just go through and reseal this stuff. Then you can enjoy the cruise without leaving puddles everywhere. Luckily with this car, I did have to repaint the hood like you saw in previous videos, and it matches perfectly. The rest of the paint is decent. It doesn't need to be redone. The interior is pretty much immaculate. I don't have to restore this whole car and redo the whole thing. I just need to address the leaks and put everything back together, and then I can finally be done messing around with all the engine and transmission stuff. I got a good solid platform, what they call good bones. Like I mentioned, I don't have to gut the interior. I don't have to rip all the body off the frame, everything. It's really all in really good shape. But it sucks I had to pull it all apart. I was looking forward to do some cruising in this thing, and now it's back in the shop, back apart. But I definitely wanted to do a video to show you guys, you find that low mile car, this is what you can expect. You might get a month or two of cruising out of it, and things are going to start letting loose. This is something to negotiate with the seller and say, I understand it's very low miles, it's 10,000 miles on it, but it's also something that I can't expect to take it out and go cruising and put another 10 or 20,000 miles on it in the first year, because this is going to happen. It's going to start puking fluid all over the place. So this is the ongoing saga of the 63 Cadillac Coupe De Ville. Some of you actually commented, what's the updates on that, what's going on with that car, and this is where we stand with it. Now I get to play the parts hunting game, and some stuff will be easy to find, other things won't be. This is another situation as well. When you bring an old car like this to a shop, you could spend 2 weeks just finding all the parts. You find somebody who might have them, they say, hey, I'll look, I'll get back with you, and they might take 4 or 5 days to get back with you. Until then, you're doing this. And the customer's like, is my car done yet? Is my car done yet? It's the name of the game with these old cars. You get everything apart, you get a parts list together, then it's time to start hunting for parts, and it's a long waiting game. If you're curious what kind of tools that Junior might use to pull this engine out, or any tools we use in the shop to work on the cars, they're listed for sale in our Amazon affiliates link in the description below. If you purchase anything there, we get a small cut and really appreciate it. Make sure to hit the subscribe button, because we have tons of more cool cars to come, and you definitely want to keep up on what else we might find out with this Cadillac. Thanks for watching.